new capital gains tax, the world economy as a whole. Love some future insights into like what you think.
He wants to increase the tax rate that you pay on capital gains to 44%, which would be like the highest that it's ever been. They say it's a wealth tax and it only impacts 0.13% of the population, but it's definitely not only a fraction of a percent of the population. GDP per capita is falling, so Canadians are getting poorer on an individual basis. We're basically set up for like a big debt crisis in Canada.
Yeah.
So in the GTA, it's very hard to make a good investment because you're usually competing with a home buyer. They have a qualitative incentive to pay more than you. We're getting into this environment where governments are trying really hard to recuperate all of the money that they spent during the global pandemic. People wanted to bring their money to Canada for that reason. Now they're saying, oh, these are some warning signs that I don't like. You can see the numbers flowing into places like Dubai.
Yeah.
It should be hard to buy and sell a house because it's a very complex and high risk transaction where people are spending less time than they would looking at a pair of shoes.
What up, everyone? Welcome back. This is Price to Sell. I'm your host, Matthew Campoli. And today we brought back someone special because first episode did well. Everything he's been doing has been doing well. And I don't really need to introduce him, but this is Daniel Foch, part 2.
Cool. I've never, since my mom, nobody's ever really called me special, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
People do call me special.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a good
Different context, I suppose.
Different context, yeah.
Cool.
But I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it. But this is Daniel Foch, part 2, and we're going to just dive into everything. Economy, Canadian real estate.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? As of late, there's been a ton of news.
Yeah.
And, a ton of things coming out. So you've been the guy. You've been a go-to source, and it's just you're continuing to get bigger and bigger with that, and in regards to people wanting to hear what you have to say. So kudos to you.
Thanks, man.
No problem.
I appreciate that.
But let's dive into it. I mean, like a couple topics we can jump into that have been hot.
Sure.
We'll preface like Toronto condo market.
Yeah.
Developers, what's going on there, new capital gains tax, Canadian housing plan, the world economy as a whole, right? And then just love some future insights into like what you think. Because a lot of question marks.
Too many, yeah. It's scary time.
So where should we start, man? I'm going to leave the floor to you.
Yeah, okay. Maybe we can start with maybe the capital gains thing because Joe Biden just announced that he wants to do the same thing in the U.S. Something similar. Increase their capital gains tax. So the U.S. is a little different because they are 100% inclusion rate, whereas in Canada we just increased our inclusion rate from 50 to 66% for different groups of like corpses. They're all impacted by that, but in the U.S. they've always been 100% inclusion rate. He wants to increase the tax rate that you pay on capital gains to 44%, which would be like the highest that it's ever been. So it's just kind of funny because there's been this whole thing about how, people are going to leave Canada and take their businesses to the U.S. or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, well, I think most of the Western world has the same problem, which is that they spent so much money and now the interest rates are high and their national debt burden is expensive. Canada's spending more money than we've ever spent on interest, spending the highest percentage of our deficit and highest percentage of GDP on interest ever. So they need to get revenue, right? This is why the CRA is making an effort to extract revenue from real estate, from individuals, why the government's trying to tax people more.
Do you want to just break down what this new capital gains tax is?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so in Canada, they increased the capital gains tax inclusion rate, which means that, so right now you would pay capital gains tax at whatever your individual tax rate is, your income tax. 50% of your capital gains would be added to your income, and then it would be taxed at that rate. They're going to increase that inclusion rate to 2/3 or 66.6% over $250,000. So if you realize a capital gain of $500,000, the first $250,000 would be taxed at the old rate. The next $250,000 will be taxed at the new rate, or included at the new rate. Sorry. And for corporations, all of them move up from 50 to 66.6%. And in Canada, a lot of wealth is tied up in capital gains, and so they say it's a wealth tax, or they kind of positioned it to be that way, and it only impacts 0.13% of the population. But I did a pretty long YouTube video breaking down what percentage of Canadians probably have a qualifying amount of real estate that when they do sell now, they just got hit with 8 to 20% increase in their tax burden. So it's definitely not only a fraction of a percent of the population. But anyway, yeah, that's what's going on. So I think look, we got a government that's needs revenue.
Yeah, for sure.
It was only a matter of time before they started to, and they did create a lot of wealth, through immigration, through low rates, through housing policy. Like, one could argue that it's like modern monetary theory, which is basically where government takes a bunch of money, they spend. Governments who can issue their own currency can just spend money, and then that money circulates in the economy. It earns a return. It is economically productive, and then later they tax it back out. And now we're at the tax it back out phase.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what it seems like.
And do you think this is going to turn people off from wanting to sell?
Yeah, I think it could have an adverse effect on what they're hoping. I think that it increases the incentive for somebody to refinance rather than sell, right? Like if you're gonna pay, capital gains on 66% tax on 66% of the capital gain, plus switching costs, so like paying a realtor to sell it, etc. Or you can just refinance at 70% loan to value, tax free, and put that money to work somewhere else and just pay an interest cost as long as it's cash flowing.
Yeah.
I think it will increase the incentive for people to cash flow rather than, and it could also shift, and this is probably their objective with the policy. It could also shift the way Canadians think about real estate, where we should be buying for cash flow. We should be buying to be able to refinance later and let the rent of the property pay off the debt service rather than buying because it's going to go up in value.
Yeah, playing the equity game.
Yeah.
Which has been, it's worked in the past.
It's worked for a lot of people for a long time until like basically rates started going up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And do you think that, especially on your videos, you read the comments, there's like people who are like really pissed off about this, and there's, I guess, some fake accounts who are just really trolling.
Yeah.
You see those ones?
No, but
you can just tell. Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe.
I don't know if you ever go through your comments.
Yeah. No, I try to all the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I
Quite
feed
funny.
the trolls.
The
It's
debates.
like a strategy. Yeah, no, I like the debates.
Yeah.
It's good. That builds engagement on like your social media, right?
For sure.
I like always just if the meanest people are the ones I just like thank them for their comment, wish them a good life.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So how do you think this affects the investor mindset moving forward?
I think this, in combination with OSFI's new rule to cap bank portfolios at 4.5x income, will make it so that our real estate investment environment is purely going to be based on income, not capital gains. I also think that capital appreciation is probably somewhat dead here in Canada for a bit. Like I think that I've said this for a long time. Like I said this in like 2017 that like the next correction that we saw in Canadian real estate after that 2017 little blow off would be the kind of end of cycle, and it would look exactly like the 90s. Maybe I got lucky, but like it does look exactly like the 90s. And even like last time I was in here, I was starting to feel a little bit more optimistic about the Canadian economy, but now with like the budget, with the political shift that we're likely going to see in 2025, like there's just so much happening, and our debt to GDP is so high that the government's being forced to like, we're basically set up for like a big debt crisis in Canada, which is, it's unfortunate. But anyway, so where that leads us is sort of into a period of like austerity and economic, guess we're like stagflation almost, where any GDP growth is being led by government spending and immigration and non-permanent residence population growth. GDP per capita is falling, so Canadians are getting poorer on an individual basis. And in the 90s, this happened. We saw a big drop in house prices, which we just saw in 2022, sorry. And then kind of like a slow grind down, another 5%, 10%, which is kind of what we're in the middle of right now. You're seeing some areas recover a little bit, but then it was like sideways for like 10 years.
Yeah.
And then it slowly recovered by like 2002. From like 89 to 2002 it took to get back to that peak, and that was the nominal peak. If you adjust that for inflation, it was like 89 to 2012. So that's kind of where I think we're at. Like, I don't really see anything changing in that regard unless like we saw a major political shift where somebody was basically just willing to like completely shrink the government and diversify the Canadian economy into, mining precious metals. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't see anybody actually doing that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask too. Like, where you think we are in that cycle right now? So you think that might see a similar trend sideways for a while?
Yeah. I would say if we do see house price growth, it'll be like kind of in line with inflation. So, you're going to see like 2-3% growth. I think that's what we saw last year. I think you'll see that again this year. So on a real basis, like adjusted for inflation, you're seeing zero house price growth, right? Or maybe even a reduction in house prices on a real basis, like adjusted for inflation.
Did you do any digging or research into maybe how the investor from like 89 2002 made their money? Like maybe the best form of investment style.
Yeah. I mean, what's performed well in all environments is buying for principal paydown and cash flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 89, anybody who bought in 89 lost a lot of money, right? It was very similar to what we were seeing today. Back then, if you ask your parents, they're like, everyone was flipping paper on detached homes. They had this speculation crisis. Like, you'd move into a brand new detached, and 7 people had owned the paper on it before. That was before they even had the capital gains tax or HST on assignments and stuff. And so that's kind of what prompted a lot of regulatory reform, which is similar to what we're seeing right now, right? You're seeing foreign ownership buying, flipping taxes, all of that. Takes the regulators a long time to catch up. But then, had you bought at the bottom, like 94, I think was the bottom. I mean, you would have done fine on a capital appreciation basis, but had you bought you could have bought a cash flowing duplex or probably single family in Toronto then, right? And so you would have amortized an entire mortgage during that period of time, because it's 25 years, give or take. And then you also would have seen the capital appreciation, whereas had you just bought it for capital appreciation, you wouldn't have seen the cash flow and mortgage amortization. I think that's the time-tested and true, like, good real estate investment thesis.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Super long-term.
Yeah.
Patience.
Yeah.
The problem is the cash flow, though.
Yeah.
It's something hard. It's hard to find, especially in GTA. Right?
Yeah, I think it's actually becoming easier as like rents. We're seeing double-digit rent growth. I mean, it's kind of capped out, I think, a little bit, and probably will start coming down a little bit for this cycle. But with the unit creation, right? Like, actually, you should have these guys on the show, rehousing.ca. I'm not sure if you've checked it out, but they basically built like this plan to cut up houses. Like they took like the 12 most common houses in Toronto, how you could cut them up into multiplexes, and like with the 4-unit upzoning in the city of Toronto, I mean, now you can create 4 units out of any residential lot in the city. If you buy a house, like maybe not downtown, even here, like, I mean, if you buy right, if you can keep your land cost or like land plus house cost in like the $1.5 million range and get a couple of units out of it, like those are units that are competing with a 1 or 2 bedroom condo that's renting for what, $2,000, 25, $3,000.
Yeah.
So like, if you can get 2 of those, just 2 of those into a house, but maybe 3 of them, like now you're $6,000 to $9,000 a month. If the key is keeping your land costs and then your construction costs low, which a lot of people, it seems like, are doing that by not getting the proper permits or not doing things properly.
So this is a build from scratch kind of setup.
Build from scratch is too expensive. I think people who are cutting up existing supply is where, where you're
or adding on to.
Yeah, you're doing additions.
Conversions.
Or like basement apartments or multiplexing stuff. Like, I mean, there's a lot of huge houses in Toronto. And
For sure.
Toronto, Etobicoke, Scarborough, right? Like there's a lot of big houses, a lot of land that you could easily put multiple units on that people are doing successfully and getting cash flow. And you can technically do 4 units plus a garden suite, and that would actually qualify for CMHC MLI Select financing, which is like the cheapest rent, highest loan to value, and longest amortizations in the
What's
market.
the LTV on that?
They'll go as high as 95, but like it would be, you'd be comfortable to assume like an 80%. Yeah.
Beautiful. And like just let's stick to Canada, but then I want to branch off a little bit. where are you seeing more opportunity? Maybe
Yeah.
provincially,
Yeah.
other provinces.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, we've seen this exodus of GTA capital to all over Canada. I think Calgary seems pretty overbought, to be honest with you. Calgary's like pretty good at predicting recessions. Like usually there's a huge run up in house prices in Calgary right before a recession. Ontario outflows are pretty good at predicting recessions as well. So I like Saskatchewan, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think
you said this on the last time
yeah,
as well.
I still like it.
Okay.
Prices are better now, even.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just it has the landlord friendliness of Alberta, but the prices of like Moncton, it's super cheap. I like Quebec, honestly. I think it's
Okay.
Quebec's like a little bit of an outlier. Like I work with a lot of like private equity groups that they won't touch that market. I guess language laws make it difficult. You have to have an office there, stuff like that. And so that tells me, okay, well, like I just look at for markets where I'm not competing with people with irrational consumers. So in the GTA, it's very hard to make a good investment because you're usually competing with a home buyer.
Yes.
And they have a qualitative incentive to pay more than you. Right?
Emotions, all that. Yeah.
And so there are areas in the GTA, like I'll just to kind of really easily illustrate this example, like main roads. I like main roads. Like you can get the same house on a main road as you would in a subdivision or like right around the corner, identical house for like a pretty good discount, 5 to 10% discount because families don't want to live on main roads.
It's true.
And you can multiplex that, and the upzoning potential of that is far better because it's located on a main road. So like most municipalities have avenue plans or major arterial road plans, or their secondary plans, their municipal secondary plans allow for upzoning of houses on main roads. So like your output value is a lot better and your input cost is a lot cheaper because you're not competing. So on that same token, I like Quebec because it does have that pricing inefficiency. Like you can find some incredibly cheap multiplexes in most markets in Quebec that will cash flow, and they're close. I think that's the biggest thing too. They're close, and I like traveling there. Like I like going to Quebec City, Montreal.
Yeah.
Saskatchewan is very far away, so it's like harder to be a at scale acquisitions guy out there. But it's far more landlord favorable, and the prices are even cheaper.
True.
Yeah.
Do you own out there? Saskatchewan?
No.
Okay.
No.
And then outside of Canada, so that obviously we see all this hype,
Yeah.
right? Florida,
Yeah.
Dubai,
Yeah.
Saudi. What do you think on that logic? On, let's just say, like the hype that comes from like social media and all these online articles, all of this noise people are hearing. What are your thoughts on that from an actual like economic standpoint?
I think like Florida, I like as a market, but I do get the fear that it kind of has like a similar thing. Like I almost like look at where all the GTA investors are, and I'm like, that kind of scares me a little bit. Like you're seeing
Like
Ohio
all flocking.
too. Yeah. They're pretty good at like finding or like killing a market.
Yeah, I was gonna say killing. Yeah. Just purely
like,
saturating.
Yeah, like Florida like a year ago, or like but once it gets like super GTA guru'd out. But it is I like the market. I like Florida. I like Texas. I think like a lot of those Sunbelt, you're seeing like a lot of political migration from businesses as well, like which is job creators, which is like sustainable long-term growth of an economy there. I think those markets are great. I think I think a lot of the Central America, Mexico, Costa Rica, I think you're seeing a lot of capital moving away from like the Western world's tax policy, really, right? Dubai is another great example. It doesn't surprise me. I think it's going to be a continued thing if the Western world, it's very similar to what you saw in Europe at the turn of their century, or like the kind of their major economic decline. I think the U.S. is exceptionally strong, and I would imagine that resilience will be proven, but it won't stop people from leaving places that they don't agree with politically or from a tax policy perspective and whatever. And we're getting into this environment where governments are trying really hard to recuperate all of the money that they spent during the global pandemic, and that's painful. Like
for sure,
and people are going to run away from it. It's going to push people away.
You think it's safe to say that Canada is one of those places?
I think
Or-
Canada is probably like close to the epitome of one of those
Yeah, right.
places. Like I don't know, there's a couple of like, it's easy to look at certain metrics, and I'm pretty good at finding the metrics that like make us look really bad.
Yeah.
But there's quite a few that we're doing very well on. But yeah, I think like without a major, like I do have hope that after the election, I think that we'll go through a rebuilding phase, and it could be like really, the best decade to like, I don't want to give up on Canada, but I can understand why certain people who are in different financial positions from me or have assets they want to relocate or whatever would want to leave. So yeah, I definitely think Canada is on that list, if not like close to first on that list.
For sure. And then for the business owner now, and also as a real estate investor, but like owning a business here, it's getting more difficult, obviously, with the taxes and all that.
Yeah.
Right. So like what are you seeing out there in terms of, I know a lot of people are relocating, like an example again, like Dubai there's no tax, right? Things like that. People are moving their businesses, corporations.
Yeah.
What are you seeing a lot of, and what do you foresee?
I think you see a lot of that from people in Canada moving to the US. I think it's really hard for a Canadian to pick up and move to somewhere like actually a world away. Like I haven't really seen any business movement from Canada to markets that far away.
Yeah.
I'm sure it exists, and it could just be a selection bias on the people that I talk to. I would say that, you can see a lot of what you are starting to see is like we've had record outflows of migrant capital in Canada, or like foreign direct investment in Canada, and you're seeing a lot of the countries who came here because of political stability, because of lack of authoritarian direction, things like that, right? People wanted to bring their money to Canada for that reason. Now they're saying, oh, these are some warning signs that I don't like economically or politically or whatever. And I'm not saying that this is what I think, but this is what I think that they think. And they're saying, we're getting out of here and we're going to go to. And I think that those foreign direct investment, you can see the numbers flowing into places like Dubai or certain areas of the U.S.
Yeah. Like Latin America, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
For sure.
It's definitely interesting. Just hard to like.
Yeah.
The actuality of like picking up the business and doing that.
Yeah.
I think it's challenging, but it's getting to that point now.
It depends on the business, right? Like,
it's true.
Like I know a contractor who has intentions to run his business remotely from the U.S. and he's building his business over the next couple of years to be able to be run from afar. But then people with online businesses, I mean, the hardest part is convincing the U.S. to let you run your business there, really. So that's why I think people are going to a place like Dubai if you're running a remote business, because they're like, yeah, sure, come on in.
Yeah.
The U.S. knows that their citizenship trades at a premium, right? So they're just like, they're not as all Canadians are. You see them in my comment threads like, oh, we're all going to the U.S. It's like, okay, cool, like have fun. Like it's not as easy as you just said, right?
Yeah.
Like, sure, you can go for 6 months of the year, but you're still Canadian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because in those comments, some people will be like, "We don't want you." Like the Americans, we don't want you. Or like, I've seen like Colombians, people doing real estate in Colombia, like, get the hell out of my country.
Yeah.
In Mexico, get the hell out of my country.
Yeah.
So it's pretty funny to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
people hate the gentrifiers wherever you go. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's becoming more and more common.
For sure.
It's become more regular.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Citizens of the world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, anybody who's running an online business, like, why not? Right?
Yeah, exactly. If you can work remote, right? Just, plant yourself somewhere where it makes more sense. Okay, great, man. It's been good info. I'd love to get into Toronto condos now.
Okay.
And everything that's been going on with that.
Yeah.
It's clearly been taking a beating.
Yeah.
So I'd love your input into like what you're seeing and what you foresee.
Yeah. So I guess the figure that came out is that we're like 75% below the long-term average, or 70% below the long-term average for pre-construction sales, which is not a good number at all. I would expect that that's going to continue for a while. Like, I don't think that even 100 basis points of rate cuts are going to help that. And I, it's tough because there's friction at every point. Like, buyers can't pay more because of rates. Builders can't charge less because of construction costs and rates. I mean, the only people who really have the ability to move here is the government by either reducing fees, which, I mean, the federal government already reduced HST on purpose-built rental, GST on purpose-built rental, provincial HST on purpose-built rental. Municipal governments are really, everyone's looking at them. It's like, are you guys going to get rid of development charges on purpose-built rental if you want that. That being said, that's still not condos, right? But if people aren't lining up to buy condos, like the way that we used to create affordable housing in this country, it's fascinating actually. For the last 10 years, a builder would launch a project, a bunch of people would line up and they would buy those units and they would absorb those units, and it would cost them, say, $3,500 a month to absorb that unit. And they would rent that out for $2,500 a month. So they would be cash flow negative because they believed that the value was going to go up, or because they're a horrible investor, but whatever the actual, like, you know what I mean? There's some reason that they did that. And that would create affordable housing. Like that, now that unit is able to be rented to somebody for 2/3 of the cost of owning it.
Yeah.
That's affordable housing. And that's socializing the cost. Like that's a socialization. That's a socializing the cost of affordable housing. Now, the government is expecting builders to, they're hoping that builders will socialize that cost of affordable housing by continuing to build these things on that CMHC MLI Select financing that I described, which is 95% loan to value, up to 50-year amortization, right?
It's for purpose built?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
only for purpose built rental. But yeah, so I think that shift is taking place, and that's kind of, I would expect that that'll be a lasting shift. Like I don't think we'll ever go through the pre-construction condo frenzy phase that we just went through, unless construction costs come down massively or we get back to 0% interest rates, neither of which are going to happen, really. Like let's be honest, right?
Like even on resale, it's like they're really, really, really tough sales right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
As it should be. Like that's what a market should be like.
Yeah.
It should be hard to buy and sell a house because it's a very complex and high risk transaction, and people should put a lot of thought and time and consideration into it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this like saturated profession with 70,000 people, highest realtors per capita in the world, where people are spending less time than they would looking at a pair of shoes.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
That's my thought.
And what's your forecast into the Toronto condo market?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if there's much, like, I think logic and economics would tell me that the prices should continue to fall. We have a record supply. We had record supply close last year. We have record supply closing this year. And that's just what's under construction in the pipeline. 3 years from now, you have a gap, right? Because that other article from Urbanation showed that 60 projects are now on hold. So like 3 to 5 years from now, you actually have a big supply gap. And that's probably when that's going to supercharge the recovery eventually. But there's a lot of pain between now and then. So with that being said, I don't know if we can see much more downside in condos, because all of these new condos that are closing, they're priced like 20 to 30% above the market. And as long as they close, hypothetically, an appraiser can say that unit closed at $1,400 a square foot and it's right across the street. So shouldn't this unit be worth close to $1,400 a square foot, but depreciated to however, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the mechanics of that are complicated. You know, what should probably happen, or what would happen failing any fail-safe measures from banks and the government, is that all of these units would fail to close. And that's just not happening. We've seen projects that are over the money close. Probably there's a variety of reasons why this could take place, but banks likely want to see buyers close because they want to transfer the risk from one single borrower, the developer, to 500 purchasers. And that as a bank shareholder and as a member of the Canadian economy, you should also want to see that take place. I think that the complication becomes when we get these projects that are really far out of the money. You know, they're 30, 40% overvalued, and the buyers don't want to close, and they see that the banks wanting them to close. It's kind of like, that seems off to me, right? Yeah. I don't know if we'll end up at that point, but there's quite a few projects that look like that in the next 2 years.
For sure.
So that's, if those fail and builders are taking back a bunch of units that they probably can't sell because there's a bunch of people who have already closed in the units, and if they sold them at what they were actually worth in today's market, they'd piss off all of their people who closed. Yeah. They can't rent them out because they have inventory loans on them. I think, and I spoke with both housing ministers a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, and I told both of them, I said, you guys need to like look into this, because that's a bunch of supply that could make it to the rental market almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs help, because those are like all those units are potentially in distress.
Yeah.
Builders don't necessarily, like all the big builders, they don't really care, because they already have a 15 to 20% deposit, 10 to 20% deposit on the unit. So they get the unit back at a discount. They can probably sue the person for the difference if they fail to close. It's just the headache of taking possession of that, paying interest on it, not being able to rent it out, paying HST if you do decide to rent it out, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's like the condo market to me in Canada, and this is very similar to the 90s. Condos really were the big original cause, right? Everybody was kind of watching what was happening in that market.
Yeah.
It's like the scary, kind of systemically risky one from my perspective.
For sure. And a lot of developers are holding off now too, right?
Yeah, 60 projects. And I think like Ben Tal, even at the beginning of when construction costs started going up and the sales started to drop, he was saying 2/3 of developers had shelved or canceled projects.
Yeah.
But, and those who can pivot to purpose-built rental, they will.
True.
Like, why wouldn't they? Like, why would they not want to own those assets on a long amortization and experience the cash flow, or flip it to a pension fund or whatever, right? But so many projects were bought at really, really high values. Land values are now down like 30%. If their land cost basis was too high, the project just doesn't pencil. So that's where it's a challenge.
And what are your thoughts on the new Canadian housing plan?
Yeah, there's some good stuff. It's like, I'll start by saying this. In my conversation with the housing minister on the podcast, it became clear to me that they do really see this as like very, very important for them to even have a chance at the next election. And I think polls show us that they don't really have that much of a chance, but let's set that aside. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, they don't have the ability to execute that. And I would agree, like, they don't really have a track record to execute a lot of the things that they're talking about here. But they do have a sense of urgency to try and figure it out, which is interesting to me, because it's like it's do or die for them. If they don't make some meaningful progress on housing, like, there's no they might be third party by the time the next election's done. It's not even can they win if they execute everything. I mean, yeah, if they executed everything and Canadians were all comfortably housed and the economy was pumping, yeah, maybe they have a shot, but there's just not enough time to turn that around, right?
For sure.
What I find admirable is that, and this surprised me, because like I think my views and criticisms towards the current party are not hard to find, but is that they know that they're probably not going to win the next election, and they still care about executing this, Like, it's like they're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because it's going to get them the election, because I don't think they're going to get the election. I don't think there's any way for them to rationalize that they will. So that's kind of nice. The plan itself, there's some really interesting stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff for real estate professionals, like for us to advise clients. I think we're going to continue seeing this theme of upzoning that I talked about earlier, where you can buy a house in the city of Toronto and put 4 units in it. I mean, there's so many McMansions, so many baby boomers that are going to be downsizing in the next 10 years. This is why I think it's hard for house prices to recover. Imagine like every baby boomer who has 3 times the square footage that they need, downsizing into a smaller unit, and then that house gets cut up into 3 units. I think there's a ton of opportunity for that, like turning McMansions into 4plexes or duplexes or whatever. So that's a big one. I think the industrialization of housing, which they talk about, building more modular, focusing on investing in technologies, 3D printing, et cetera. I mean, I think that's far too long of a solution for them to actually execute in a meaningful timeline, but an interesting one nonetheless. One of the ones that really stood out to me, especially for Toronto, is building houses on top of old retail buildings, like that have nothing above them. I've always thought about like there's that underutilized potential of vertical infill, and most of those are engineerable. Like, it's a concrete or cinder block retail with steel truss system, flat roof. It can hold 2 stories of residential, or even 1 story of residential, whatever it is. And like so they're going to provide funding for stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for real estate professionals to really research and become experts in the apartment loan construction program, which will probably carry over to the next government anyway, and figure out how to connect clients with groups like CMHC to get money from the government to do projects like that, to get housing done. I mean, the government is like making it exceptionally clear that they are taking this seriously. They're throwing money at it, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't think it's their track record of the money going to good places is not exceptionally good. But that being said, for people in our profession, helping clients connect to that money to do meaningful things to create housing is going to be a huge opportunity for at least the next year and a half while they're in power, and probably the next 2 terms, regardless of what government ends up being in there.
Yeah. And shifting to the business of a real estate agent now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the NAR settlement? In the States, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's going to provide a really interesting insight into the Canadian versus U.S. justice systems.
Okay.
I'll be surprised if we get the same result here.
Okay.
So because we have a copycat lawsuit here, class action against a bunch of real estate boards and trade associations in Ontario and Alberta, I think, and there's a couple of other spots that have joined in. And
Is that new or has it been around?
it's been around for a while. It was like right after the original NAR thing. But yeah, I don't think our result will be the same. I think that this being said, like NAR was, I think, the biggest lobbying group in the U.S. So you would hope that, because like I think the real estate lobby is really strong in Canada. But I think it'll show that the U.S. justice system is far more in favor of the consumer than the Canadian justice system. And I think that'll be a while before we really see technology impact the real estate industry in Canada in a way like that. And if it does, it'll likely be led by the boards, to be honest. Like the Toronto Real Estate Board has like massive staying power, right? They're the biggest real estate board in the world.
Yeah.
They have a ton of capital. They have a playground of agents to test things on, to learn things with, right? Like from a technology perspective, et cetera. So I think that they kind of have a head start on being a part of that, rather than like risking sort of the Zillowification and carving out of different roles of a realtor, like could happen in the US. I know this because like we just licensed a data science technology to them, the one that I used to use all the time. I'm not sure if like anybody who's been following me for a while, I used to do a lot of charts, like could like instantly make charts using Toronto Real Estate Board data.
Yeah.
That'll be available for all realtors soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Nobody knows that yet, but
okay, there you go.
Your audience gets to know it
PTS
first. Yeah.
Nice. So you're licensing it to them?
Yeah. So they'll be.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. So I'll keep you up to date, and we can I can have the guys on the show or something to chat about it. But yeah, that's an exciting thing. I think they were going to announce it. Like it might be out by the time this episode's out. I don't know, but yeah, it should.
We're gonna actually move yours sooner because of relevant topics.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's supposed to be out soon. I'll like notify everybody once it's out.
Sweet.
I'm sure they'll do a big PR thing, and yeah.
Congrats on that.
Thanks.
And yeah, so I mean, covered a lot of topics. A question for you though.
Yeah.
What scares you the most about, let's just use the world economy as a whole? What scares Daniel the most?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the social contract of like debt, like in Canada, we're gradually like making it so that people, like if you are in a bad position with your mortgage, you just don't have to pay it. You just call the bank up and be like, I can't pay my mortgage. Like, I mean, it's not financial advice, but like the Canadian Mortgage Charter outlines all of these different things that they have to do to try and support you if that ends up being the position that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing that everywhere. Like, debt jubilee, the waiving of interest in the US. It's like, yeah, people make stupid decisions, but they weren't coerced into making those stupid decisions. And like, we have to be accountable for the stupid stuff that we did in our past. Like,
for sure.
One day I'll probably get into politics, and I've done a lot of stupid shit in my past, and I'm sure I'm going to be held accountable for those things. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm happy to, because like that's a necessary part of growing as a person. I think debt is like a monetized instrument of accountability. People who chose not to defer gratification and spend all the money in the past and now are paying for it should have to do that. And I think that we're eroding the social contract of whether or not you actually have to pay that money back. And that to me is a very concerning for like a society, a very concerning direction for a society to go.
For sure.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. So you brought up a lot of amazing insights.
Thanks. Try
Thank
my
you.
best.
You always do, and you do a great job at it. I love seeing the growth all the time.
Likewise, yeah.
But yeah, to people who want to learn more, watch you more,
Yeah.
the podcast, plug it all in right now for
Sure.
the audience.
Yeah, we have the Canadian Real Estate Investor Podcast. It's on all the podcast platforms. It's a 2-host show. It's more research based. So if you want to learn like more about investing in real estate and just research, we cover a lot of reports, policy, etc. And if you want to find me, my last name's Foch, first name Daniel. Usually, if you Google me, it'll kind of bring up whatever platform you're most likely to click on. So just Google my name and you should find me somewhere.
Awesome. He's super active, always on the ball, and a really good source to learn about information right away. So you're pretty quick with it.
Yeah.
So
Thanks,
keep it
man. I'll
up.
try my best. Yeah.
Keep it up. So you've been great as always, man.
Yeah.
This was Daniel Foch part 2. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, it's April 24th.
Yeah.
So we're gonna release this as soon as possible. So hopefully it hits you guys in your ears and your YouTube channel soon, so it's all relevant and you guys get the answers to a lot of questions I'm sure a lot of you have right now. But other than that, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for always tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. If you have people interested in this particular topic, share it with them. I'm sure you do. And we'll see you guys in the next one.